Hello and welcome, dear photography friends. My name is Hendrik and today I'm talking about the Sony A7R IV. An amazing 61 megapixel camera that takes amazing photos with rich details, good dynamic range, but there's also some downsides. Before I'm going to talk about everything that makes this camera so amazing, let's look at some of the downsides that I found out during the past 3 months where I was using this camera. Now, first of all, it's heavier than the Sony A7 III that I am filming this video on right now. Substantially heavier, not by a lot, but it's enough that on a long day of hiking, so if I do something like 20 to 30 kilometers, I do feel it if it is here in my capture clip. Another thing is, this camera isn't cheap. It's 4,200 euros new on the Sony website. You of course can find it somewhere else cheaper with some discounts or some cashbacks from Sony, but nevertheless this is an expensive camera. Another thing that really annoyed me is that this camera needs very long to start up. I am a shoot on the go kind of type, and if I see something I take the camera out and put it on, and with my Sony A7 III I can shoot in a second or two. This camera needs up to 5 seconds, sometimes even longer. It's really slow to get ready, and if you want to photograph some wildlife, then the wildlife already has disappeared in the 5 seconds that the camera needed to get on. This has happened to me. That's pretty annoying if you see a fox or a moose or something else on the trail and you want to take a photo, and then the camera just needs forever to get on. Another issue that I have with the Sony A7R IV is that the interface is pretty laggy. It's not very fast to navigate it. And secondly, the card reading times, even with high-speed cards in here, are too long. It's really, if you take some bursts of somebody skiing or running or something else that needs the 10 frames per second burst rate, you can be standing there and waiting for the buffer to clean way too long for a camera that is so powerful and expensive. There are two more things with the Sony A7R IV that I found slightly annoying during the last 3 months that I was using it, and then I will jump in and talk about all the positives of this camera. Now, number one is this little lock button on the mode dial wheel. I find it highly annoying. I understand it on the exposure compensation wheel. Totally makes sense. I have been often enough by accident changing the exposure compensation towards up or lower, and it's really annoying. So here I really like it, but here I just find it's too much work if you quickly want to change a setting. And secondly, this also relates to switching modes, that the exposure settings carry over if you are in the video mode and then you go to the photo mode, that then you have the video settings still there. Then you will switch everything and compensate everything the way you need it for your photos, and then if you switch back to the video mode, it again is that you have all the photo settings. That shouldn't happen with a camera this expensive, and it's pretty annoying if you forget to switch these settings, because then your shot or your video is ruined. But now let's look at all the good things that this camera can do. Alright, let's talk about the positives, and it's a long list, so don't worry just yet. Number one is 61 megapixels. This camera has 61 megapixels and it's absolutely insane. You can crop in 400% and see the hairs on a dog or on a person, the eyelashes. It's absolutely insane, and it is really hard to go back to a camera that has less megapixels than the Sony A7R IV. 61 megapixels of course also means really big files, and there we get into some of the problems I spoke about earlier with slow buffer readout and stuff like that. But the details that you get is wonderful, and it gives you so much room to work with, so it really is an excellent camera for portrait and landscape photographers. Now if you're considering this camera, then the 61 megapixels are nothing new to you. But the ergonomics of this camera are also really good. It's very easy to handle the camera. The grip here in the front is a little bit bigger, which makes it for people with big hands more comfortable. Still, I have normal sized hands, I would say, and for me it's also a really good grip, and I'm able to reach all the dials and buttons very easily, even with the camera in front of my eyes. The bigger grip also means that in here is the bigger battery, and battery life on this camera is really good. The Sony A7R IV has an electronic viewfinder with millions and millions and millions of dots, and it's an OLED screen, which means it's crisp with beautiful details, very sharp, and it's really great to compose an image with the electronic viewfinder. Let's continue briefly about the build of this camera. This one has, as my A7 III, dual card slots, so dual SD card slots. It's absolutely fantastic. If you're a wedding photographer, you get your backup right in there, and even if you don't do that, then you just have a lot more space and you don't need to switch cards that often. Another thing that is really good on the A7R IV are the closures for the ports. These are also weather sealed and they're very easy and nice to open. And if you are familiar with the closure systems on the Sony A7 III or previous older Sony cameras, you are aware that they're not very well designed. So big step up and very, very nice to work with. The final point about the build quality of this camera is that the weather sealing is fantastic. I have been hiking and climbing in the rain with this camera, and there has been absolutely no problem whatsoever. It can take a beating if you're by accident bump into the rock wall, and snow and rain doesn't harm the body at all. I am very, very happy and confident that I can trust this camera in any environment that I would take it to, be it minus 20 degrees in the winter in Finland going ski touring, or plus 20 degrees climbing somewhere really nice and sunny, but where it also might happen that you bump into a rock wall. What I really liked about this camera is that it has a very good dynamic range. It has a very good autofocus, and it has also 4K video. These are all three things that I, as a landscape photographer, really appreciate. Having a very good and fast autofocus is really much mandatory for me as a sports photographer, be it out skiing or trail running or climbing. Anywhere where you need a fast autofocus, this camera will be there for you. The dynamic range is also very, very good. You can get out a lot of detail out of the shadows if you adjust the settings for the highlights, and also can tone down the highlights and still not lose anything. In conclusion, I can say that this camera has been an absolute joy to work with over the past 3 months. Sadly, I need to return it, as this was just a loan camera from Sony. So again, a big shout out to Sony. Big thank you for loaning this camera for me. The only bad thing, of course, is again, now I also want to buy this camera, so you make me spend a lot of money. I don't know if you mind at all, or... Hey, thanks again for watching another of my photography videos. Usually I'm out skiing, hiking, trail running and climbing here up in the Nordic nature. If that's something you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it. You know the whole shebang, like the video, blah 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 blah. But anyway, thanks for watching, and remember, life is better outside. So take your camera, whatever it is, go enjoy nature and take some great photos. See you in the next one.